So this video is going to go into the correlation between the Susquehanna and the Seine River and the recent burning of Notre Dame Cathedral and its correlation to 3 Mile Island. And so we want to begin this with tutelatory deities, because that's what this seems to be all about. So tutelatory deity is this idea of a guardian spirit, which is also an earth spirit. And this is a understanding of reality which spanned the globe, and regardless of culture, sometime way before our modern culture. And I want to look at this from a logical perspective, and being logical is trying to use deductive reasoning. First thing I want to point out is, I recognize my own limitation to really understand how people in the past understand reality, because myself and all of us who are alive now, we are so formulated by the culture which we grew up in, that it makes understanding reality from the perspective of an earlier person or an earlier civilization almost impossible to do without looking through our own lens. So I want to first recognize that, and then secondly, I ask myself the question, I'm like, well, what do they know? How did they experience the relationship with the environment, with the earth, with the heavens, and how was that different from what we do? And did they receive different experiences, different information than what we do now? Are we blind to something which was once evident to all the other people who once lived the earth? So tutelatory deities can show themselves in many ways, with animal spirits and tree spirits and forest spirits and mountain spirits. But it seems like the most significant were river or water spirits, and this was a practice of river worship. This practice of river worship spread the globe and spread across culture as well. So it may have been practiced in different with different techniques, this practice of river worship, but there seems to be a continuity, that there's something really significant within this practice. So a couple years ago, I did a video titled "The Goddess Susquehanna," and in that video, I went into two things. One, this continuous underlying symbology of the concept of the goddess throughout throughout the Susquehanna River, both like historically and then in city names and all sorts of different things. And the second part of that video ties in a strange correlation between the Seine River and the Susquehanna. And when I say correlation, to me, it is a symbol of these two rivers resonate with one another. How and why, I don't quite understand, but it is evident that they do so. And it is my sense that this all ties back to this notion of tutelatory spirits and river goddess worship. So if you want to get more detail, I definitely recommend watching that video, but I'll go over some of the key points. The first area of resonance between the two rivers is just the name. The Seine River used to be called the Susquehanna River, and Susquehanna was also the name of the goddess of the river. They were interchangeable, and the people that lived upon the river and worshipped the goddess were known as the Susquehanni. And the name changed like 2,000 years ago, from Susquehanna to Seine through the Roman invasion of Gaul, or what we might now think of as Western Central Europe, France area, that sort of area. And when we look at Susquehanna, I looked at a lot of different books and websites that went into the different Celtic goddesses, because the Susquehannese were a Celtic people. We see that Susquehanna is associated with a lot of different things, but I pulled out a couple which jumped out at me. This one here, it describes Susquehanna as the earth goddess that lived beneath the rivers of Britain and could only be seen if the rivers were drained. It's the goddess of the many other river goddesses. This particularly caught my attention because we're seeing that. We're seeing the name Susquehanna being used in multiple places. And we also see that Susquehanna rules over earth magic and water magic, and we'll get into that a little bit more, but the entire notion behind the Susquehanna mystery is that the tutelatory spirit associated with the river was placed under a magic ritual, a 400-year ritual, in order to usurp her earth and water magic powers to influence the earth. Or at least that's what all the evidence seems to suggest. So let's go on a little bit more. Here we see Susquehanna. It's Latin for Seine, and it is the most famous of the 5 principal rivers of France, and also for the Celtic Squan, the mother goddess of the tribes of the Celts. So again, we're looking at Susquehanna as being the name of a very significant river goddess within the practice of Celtic river goddess worship and tutelatory spirits in general. And at the source of the river, there was a large sanctuary at the source of the Susquehanna, and for many hundreds of years, people traveled all around to come to this water, primarily, at least it's understood, for healing purposes. So the question which I have when I hear this is, like, why would these people come? What are they getting out of it? They weren't forced to make these pilgrimages, but they did. And so I'm open to the idea that there was something very, very tangible which occurred with the way that peoples once interacted with waters, and particularly if they are so associated with powerful tutelatory deities. So now I want to switch gears a little bit and go to John Dee. And John Dee is covered in a bunch of other videos, and he connects directly to the John Smith map and the British Empire that is covered in The Secret of the Susquehanna Part 1 and 2 and a bunch of other videos. And the reason we want to point out John Dee is because he is this one point of where we see so much, maybe a seed for where we are today, where it began. And I say this primarily between his relationship to England's imperial expansion policy at the time. Like, they were just their own kingdom, and eventually they became the British Empire. And John Dee was a driving force behind this as an idea. And then also we want to recognize John Dee's role as the person that introduced into the consciousness what we now call Enochian magic. Maybe on a tertiary level, we also want to point out John Dee's immense role in educating the navigators of what would become the British Empire. They were able to navigate better than anyone else, which allowed them supremacy upon the water, and John Dee is the guy behind him. So okay, now let's go on to Donald Tyson, and he is an occult scholar and author of many books as it relates to esoteric topics. And in particular, he is very knowledgeable about Enochian magic. In 1996, Donald Tyson wrote an essay for Gnosis magazine, and this essay is currently published in a collection of many of his essays, which came out more recently, and that book is called The Serpents of Wisdom. But you can find the essay online if you just search Enochian Apocalypse. And in itself, it's a very significant article, and I think it dovetails very nicely into a video which I did called the 100-Year Transition. But that's not what we're going to talk about right now. We want to talk or look at the connection between the John Dee's interest in Enochian magic and how that relates to British imperialism, or the eventual British Empire, and tutelatory spirits. And we see right here in the very beginning of this essay, you know, this is written from someone who is probably one of the most knowledgeable people on the planet as it relates to John Dee's history and his relationship with Enochian magic. And so he says it was Dee's plan to use the complex system of magic communicated by the angels to advance the expansionist policies of his sovereign, Queen Elizabeth I. So he was interested in Enochian magic because he wanted to go and create the British Empire. And Dee hoped to control the hostile potentates, I think that's how I pronounce it, potentates of Europe, so his enemies, by commanding the tutelatory spirits of their various nations. Here we see what the Enochian angels conveyed to Dee was not merely a potent form of magic to rule the tutelatory spirits of nations. So again, we're seeing that Enochian magic is ultimately about controlling tutelatory spirits. And then we see this other line where it says, Dee would have assumed that the harrowing of the goddess Earth, and I want to just kind of leave it at that statement and bring that back to what we were reading about Susquehanna as the goddess of the many other river goddesses, and Susquehanna being the mother goddess of the Celtic tribes. And what I'm going to suggest here, and what we're seeing, is that the reason why Jamestown was selected as the birthplace of the British Empire, the first colony, and it became the birthplace of the United States and so forth, is because it was identified that the Chesapeake Bay, which is where Jamestown is located, right at the mouth of it, the Chesapeake Bay being the same body of water as the Susquehanna River. This is the Susquehanna River, and you can see this, the Chesapeake Bay. It's the same body of water, except this lower portion flooded some 18,000 years ago, but this river is over 300 million years old. And so this river is the earth goddess, I'm going to suggest, the primary one, what we're reading about Susquehanna, or the Susquehanna River, and then by looking at what John Dee's goal was in utilizing Enochian magic, which was to build the British Empire, he did not go after just the tutelatory spirits of other nations, but he went after the tutelatory spirit of the planet. And we know that because we see what has happened afterwards. We see that it has had a planetary influence, because the British Empire went on to become the largest empire in history. And as I said, Jamestown is where the British Empire began. And so what I'm going to suggest is, as we see in so many other mappings of the spiritual world, whether angels and demons, there's always a hierarchy. And there's a hierarchy, I would suggest. If this is true, there would be a hierarchy with the tutelatory spirits. And what we have here at the Susquehanna River is the tutelatory spirit of the planet. Now, how it relates to the Susquehanna River, I do not quite understand. You know, the rules of this environment, you know, how it all works is a little bit above my own pay scale. But I think that we can begin to deduce by looking at pieces of objective information, whether that be geology or history or something along those lines. So, okay, let's build a little bit more upon this. Jamestown is directly connected with this map. This map is called the Map of Virginia. This is the Chesapeake Bay. This is the Susquehanna Warrior. This is the Susquehanna Warrior, and this is the Susquehanna River right here. And just like the Susquehanna and the Susquehanna, we have the Susquehannock and the Susquehanna. And interestingly, this is where we get the name Susquehanna from this map. More of this is covered in detail in The Secret of Susquehanna. This map is associated with John Smith, but you know, you do a little bit of digging, you see John Smith is probably just a front for Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon being the leader of the Rosicrucian order and very, very significant. The tremendous import of the Baconian mystery is daily becoming more apparent. Sir Francis Bacon was a link in the great chain of minds that has perpetuated the secret doctrine of antiquity from its beginning. So if this map connects to him, and Bacon is the predecessor of, or no, he came after. John Dee was the predecessor of Francis Bacon, so that's kind of the lineage. We had Bacon, or we had Dee, who was the advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. The next monarch was King James, and Bacon was King James's top advisor, and both Bacon and Dee played significant roles in the leadership of the Rosicrucian order. So further on into the map, we see here, this was one of the first things that jumped out at me when I saw it, was how the warrior was wearing Masonic attire, or at least a crypto version of it. And we see the fringed apron, we see the jewel in the collar, we see the posture, and so forth, when compared to this image of George Washington in Masonic attire. And in the video, The Secret of the Susquehanna, I go in and I decode how it provides a secret location, and what that secret location is the 40th parallel at the Susquehanna River. Here we have the Susquehanna River, this is the 40th parallel. All of this stuff gets really interesting. I would recommend watching that video. But this is exactly what's in the center of this circle located in that location. And we see, looking down, it's this park, and it is in this crescent moon and sun relationship, which is the same relationship we see throughout time, corresponding to alchemy and the mysteries and so forth. And interestingly enough, this park here, which is known as High Point Scenic Vista, it opens up exactly on the 400th anniversary of the founding of Jamestown, which is where the map comes from, which gives this secret location. We can see May 11th through 13th in 2007 was when Jamestown had their 400th anniversary weekend, and here we see on May 12th High Point opened. So let's bring this back to goddess worship. So within this map, we see that the warrior is wearing around its neck a wolf head. We know it's a wolf head because there's a complementary book If you go back and do some research on what the wolf symbolizes, we see that it goes back to the cult of Isis. So we see this Susquehannock warrior wearing the symbol of Isis. Now we go and we look at Paris. This is the Seine, which runs through Paris. And what does Paris mean? Paris means the for Isis. The people who lived there were worshipers of Isis. And in fact, right in the same general area where Notre Dame is, that there was an ancient temple to Isis. We'll get into that a little bit more later. It's my opinion that whether you want to call it Isis or whether you want to call it Susquehanna, whether you want to call it Semiramis, whether you want to call it Columba, we're dealing with the same idea of this mother goddess, deity or energy, or however it is that you want to understand it. And so when we see that it says that this river is associated with Isis, and now at the same time we see it's associated with Susquehanna, we're basically dealing with the same entity, but just different names. And now we're seeing the same thing happening with the Susquehanna and the Susquehanna River. Now, the second thing I want to point out is this: the warrior has this flowing hair. And this is actually, the drawing is based upon earlier drawings, which were done at a previous attempt at establishing a colony known as the Lost Colony of Roanoke, which was also under the guidance of John Dee. And my sense is like the island of Roanoke was a sacrifice, but that's just my opinion. But we see the same Native American initially drawn with straight hair, and then when we see it shown in the John Smith map, we see flowing hair. And then we go and we look and we see the flowing hair dollar was the first dollar coin issued by the United States. And the flowing hair dollar is a picture of the goddess Liberty without her hat on, and it was created by Robert Scott, who was a Freemason. So again, we see that this warrior is in Freemasonic attire, and then we also see it has flowing hair, and we know that flowing hair is a symbol tied to goddesses, particularly from a Freemasonic understanding. So then we go back and we're going to look at the location. This is the 40th parallel, and this is the Susquehanna River, and I call this entire area the Goddess Corridor. So we go back to the beginnings of the colonies, and there was a ruling goddess looking after the colonies, and she was known as Columbia. And Columba, which is the root of Columbia, is Latin for the word dove, and the dove goddess is the original mother goddess of the Sumerian mythology. So again, we're seeing like mother goddess, all this sort of stuff. But interestingly enough, the French also have a patron goddess looking after her, and her name is Marianne. And she is wearing the same Phrygian cap, which we saw here. This is the Liberty goddess without her Phrygian cap on, and we're beginning to see the same symbology over and over again. We see Marianne, and then we see Columbia, and we go back and we look at the Goddess Corridor, and right on the 40th parallel we have two towns. We have Marietta and Columbia. I'm not suggesting they were named specifically as reflections of both of these goddesses, but I'm saying that they are reflections of both of these goddesses. We see this over and over again. Another resonator. Here's the Susquehanna River. This is where it empties or transitions into the Chesapeake Bay. Here we have a town called Havre de Grace. Havre de Grace, Maryland, is named after the port city Le Havre, France. Here's Le Havre, France. Le Havre, France is where the Seine or the Susquehanna River meets the English Channel, right here. So now we have another resonator. to France and the Susquehanna and the Susquehanna. Now we'll go another level. So Harrisburg, which is right here, is located in Dauphin County. Dauphin County is named for the first son of the last king of France. So this entire area connects to, just by name, to and resonates with the French monarchy. We also know that there was plans to build an asylum of French refugees that was going to be located in Pennsylvania on the Susquehanna River for French royals. So this river again was significant to the upper class of French society, particularly at the late 1700s. So now let's go and see another resonator. So this right here, here's a Statue of Liberty. We saw the flowing hair was the Liberty bust. And we see right here the Statue of Liberty in Columbia. That's who this is. This is Columbia Pictures, the Sumerian goddess. We can see the similarity there. And here we see a picture of the replica of the Statue of Liberty on an island in the Seine River or in the Susquehanna River. And here we see a similar resonator of the Statue of Liberty located on an island in the Susquehanna River. Now, I'm not suggesting that these were done on purpose, but I am suggesting that they exist. Two islands of the same symbol of Columbia located in the Susquehanna and the Susquehanna River. And here's a bust from 2,000 years ago of Susquehanna. And look at this, and we see the same sort of symbols. We see the same iconology over and over again. So now let's go one step deeper. We're going to get a little bit weirder. So 3 Mile Island is a nuclear power station. And 3 Mile Island is located right in the Goddess Corridor. We see 3 Mile Island is located right here. So this is Marietta, this is Columbia, this is the 40th parallel. This right here is where you find the Statue of Liberty in the river, and here we have Harrisburg. And 3 Mile Island, just like Notre Dame Cathedral, is located on an island in the river. The history of 3 Mile Island is that in March 28th, 1979, it had a partial meltdown. And this meltdown had a bit of strange synchromistic connection in the fact that 2 weeks before the meltdown, there was a release of this film, The China Syndrome, which was, it was a big movie. It was nominated for Academy Awards. And The China Syndrome was all about a nuclear power plant meltdown and a cover-up that went along with it. And if that was not a predictor enough by it being released 2 weeks before the actual meltdown of 3 Mile Island, there's a line from the movie that actually says an area the size of Pennsylvania would be left permanently inhabitable. So 3 Mile Island is known locally as TMI. And TMI is phonetically similar to Tiamat, a creation and chaos goddess associated with Sumerian myths. So in the same way that Susquehanna and Susquehanna are phonetically similar, we can see the same thing happening with TMI and Tiamat. And I'm not suggesting by any stretch that TMI was named that because it was meant to be a resonator of Tiamat. I'm just saying it happened. And when we begin to look at some of the stories of Tiamat, we see that there's some similarities with nuclear with nuclear power. I mean, just the fact that it's a chaos goddess, and we're dealing with some chaotic types of of reactions, which is what the nuclear process or the radioactive process is. It's, you know, it's chaotic, but the victims of Tiamat, who was a dragon, or shown as a dragon, she filled the bodies of her enemies with poison instead of blood, which is basically the sickness, the radiation poisoning, which happens from being exposed to, you know, a meltdown. So, okay, so March 28th, 1979, this was when it occurred. So March 28th, 2019 is the 40th anniversary. And so 40 is significant for a couple of reasons. One, we're in the 40th parallel, and so much of this deals with the number 40 and you know, the Bible, whatever that may be, but undeniably it's had an immense impact on life on earth. It connects directly to our same cast of characters, primarily Francis Bacon, as he was the final editor of the King James Bible. And within the Bible, the number 40 is rather significant as it relates to trials and tribulations, whether that's 40 days and 40 nights of rain, or wrestling with the devil, or 40 years wandering in the wilderness. 40 is always the symbol of a trial and tribulation period. So now we see 40 years has gone by since this 3-mile island, since this Tiamat, this temple to Tiamat on an island in the Susquehanna River had its, what I would call, fire ritual. So if this is 3-Mile Island, and here we have, right here is the 40th parallel, this is Marietta, this is Columbia, and right here we have Lancaster County solid waste facilities. This is where an incinerator is. It is right on the river, and an incinerator is it's a symbol of fire, right? You know, it's where all of the trash from Lancaster County is brought in to be burned, and on the 40th anniversary, on March, it says March 38th right now. This is a cut and paste from a local newspaper. It actually should read the 28th. There was something very unusual. For 30 minutes, this plant, which normally has a nonstop stream of white smoke coming out of its smokestack, there was a pink plume. And this was rare enough and odd enough that it garnered coverage in the local media. And we are seeing the images both of fire, because this is the incinerator, and pink is the ultimate symbol of the woman. You know, that's anatomy. And so when we see this pink woman, female, goddess symbology with fire on the 40th, exactly to the day, the 40th anniversary to the fire ritual on the temple to Tiamat in the Susquehanna River, you know, it gets kind of interesting. I also thought this was another small little funny coincidence, if you will, but iodine was the cause of this, and it's iodide, which is the protective measure one is given when there's a meltdown. So now let's go and tie this into what we saw at Notre Dame. So Notre Dame is an island. It's located on an island in the Seine or Susquehanna River, located in Paris. And Notre Dame, which is Our Lady of Paris, Our Lady of Isis, has had a fire in the, you know, right in the fire ritual season. You know, if that's new to you, I would definitely recommend coming up to speed to all of the events that happen fire related the last 2 weeks of April. But the point which I'm making with all of this is, I've brought up in the past in the goddess Susquehanna video, like all of these things that have happened in the past, which correspond to both a link between these two rivers and whatever these rivers are, whether they are tutelatory spirits or gateways to them, whatever is the reason why our ancestors were so insistent in linking both the physical attributes of a river and the spiritual attributes of the ruling deity, typically a goddess, that these connections are just as real today as they were when, when all of going back and looking at the research and looking at the past and seeing how they connect, it's still happening, and it's being communicated in this very, very intelligent way. We see this happened 18 days after this, which was 40 years to the day of the meltdown of 3 Mile Island. So we see this happening, and is this cause of concern? Well, I think it's definitely cause to be aware of what the fire is symbolizing. I mean, whether this was done purposefully, whether this was done as part of a purposeful ritual, whether the ritual itself is being ruled by a higher ordering system, I don't know, but we can see that it has occurred. And we're seeing that there is, at the end of this 40-year trial, we're seeing this bringing down of, or at least changing shape of this great symbol to the goddess. And I'd even go and link it to the events of 9/11, because the falling of the towers were such a symbol of masculine energy. I mean, they're so phallic. And then we go and we juxtapose that to the burning of the cathedral, which is a symbol of the goddess, which is the yin to the yang of the World Trade Center. And so I share this as a demonstration of the ordering systems that exist behind the scenes, but then also a indication that we're it shouldn't be any surprise to anyone, but we're right in the middle of it. What it is, I don't know, but ultimately, I have a strong sense of the ability for this time which we're in can be traversed with immense balance. And the reason why I say that is, it's probably evident that symbols are significant to me in my own sort of my own way of going about life. A couple years ago, I made this guidebook. It's called The Rites of the 40th Parallel, and I've identified 4 different locations which you can visit, which have significant geological attributes, and I describe in detail how those geological attributes are a reflection of spiritual principles and all sorts of stuff like that, and what you can do. And one of those 4, one of the 4 sites was Chickies Rock, and this is Chickies Rock right here. This is a picture from the guidebook. They're maps of all of the places, and this is a meditation to this spot. But Chickies Rock is the key piece to it. And so let me show you where Chickies is on this map. This right here, this is where Chickies Rock is located, right at this spot, right next to Marietta, just above the 40th parallel. And the point I'm trying to make is that Chickies is undoubtedly a significant symbol to me, just from the very fact that I went and put in the energy to create this. So about a month before the 40th anniversary of 3 Mile Island. I was riding my bike and I was riding by Chickies Rock. This is an actual pictures of Chickies Rock. And something relatively unusual happened. You can see on the bottom right here, this large chunk of rock, which was right here from the face of the rock, it fell and it broke into all of these pieces. And, you know, obviously that happens, but doesn't happen that frequently. I haven't seen anything of this size fall since my time here. And to give you an idea of the size of this stone, this is a human being, probably like 6 feet tall, and this stone right here, just this width is probably about 6 feet. It's a good size rock. And when you look a little bit closer, this was that rock right here, this is 6 foot span, it is raised. The back end is raised. It is meeting the ground here, and this is raised up. And if you go around to the front, you're going to see that this rock, this enormous rock, this thing has to weigh easily 2 tons. This is very, very dense stone, very, very heavy. And it is being supported, it is being lifted up by this incredibly small stone relative to the size of what it's supporting. And this stone fell when this fell. It was all part of the same chaotic crash down here, yet somehow it landed in such a way that it was all balanced. And so if this here is a symbol to me, if Chickies Rock is a symbol to me because of the amount of energy and the amount of time I have placed into here, when I see something really out of the ordinary occur, which is just the falling of this stone off the face of the rock, and I see this extraordinary landing, this amazing literal symbol of balance occur, and then we see all of this stuff happen afterwards, the 40th anniversary of 3 Mile Island, and then the burning of Notre Dame at a location which resonates very deeply with it. I can't help but come to the conclusion and feel safe in saying, like, yeah, despite all of this chaos, there's a balance underneath. And if you let it, it's going to be able to provide the support.